Good morning, and happy Sunday from the farm. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Outside the Soil, where we talk story about topics related to the farmers and ranchers using hydroponic practices to grow the crops and creatures we need to eat. And I am your host, Seany Alfalfaseed. Thank you for being with us on this beautiful morning. Last week, I left off with some story about my discovery of a tomato in the Epcot Center and seeing these little red orbs that look like Christmas ornaments hanging off of this metal trellis. And it led me down this path to figure out how to grow tomatoes like that here in Colorado. And today I'm actually breeding a cherry tomato that is super, super sweet. A few years ago, I came across this one and I ate it, and I had never tasted something so sweet, and I immediately spit the seeds out. And when I went to plant out the seeds, I got all these different types of tomatoes. And so that told me that I had originally eaten a hybrid. And I went on this journey to figure out how to standardize and get a really, really good tomato with some desirable characteristics that I was looking for. And specifically, I was looking for one that tasted really good, that I could grow indoors in a greenhouse, that was high yielding. And today, I think we are on the path to getting that tomato. We call it the red velvet, and the faces on the people that eat it tell me they've never tasted something so sweet. And it's fantastic because I attribute a lot of what I've learned to a mentor that I had when I went to school in Hawaii. And today's episode is a bit about me in the perspective of my first mentor, Dr. Harry Ako. And he would be my first mentor that I recognized as someone that taught me something so instrumental and foundational in my life that it fundamentally changed how I think and how I do things now today in the world. In the simplest terms, he actually taught me how to think. And it's funny that I thought that I knew how to think before I met Dr. Ako. Years and years in school showed me that it was not quite true once I went to school on Oahu. But real quick, while I've got you, if you like what you hear or have heard so far, leave a comment or review in the box below. Let me know what you're interested in or what you've liked, and let others know why they should listen to. When I was finding my path back towards what it is I wanted to be and trying to understand how I wanted to grow tomatoes, I enrolled in the community college in Greeley, Ames Community College, and started studying the different hard sciences. Biology and chemistry were the ones that I leaned into and loved the most. During that time, as a young man, I was also dating this lady who was interested in going to school at the University of Hawaii at Hilo to study marine biology. She loved scuba diving and had spent a lot of time in the ocean as a young girl, and that was what she wanted to do. One day, while we were talking about our futures of education and what we were going to do, our futures together, she jokingly said to me, "Have you ever thought about going to school in Hawaii?" And I laughed, and I had never thought about that. Later that night, I actually went on to the Google search engine and typed in University of Hawaii hydroponics and aquaponics. And the story of aquaponics is a bit buried in my book, Thinking Outside the Soil, and I'll gloss over that a bit today of how I came across aquaponics from J.D. Sawyer, who later became another mentor of mine. Google's really cool. We've all Googled things, and when I Googled Hawaii aquaponics and hydroponics, this just slew of search results came through and just flooded my page. And the top 10 results I started to click on and created new tabs in my Chrome browser and just put them up there and went one by one and started reading what they were doing at the University of Hawaii. And I was blown away by what I was reading. What was really neat was this gentleman named Dr. Harry Ako was developing sustainable agriculture systems using hydroponic principles for farmers on remote Pacific islands. His research was focused on the American Samoa, and he was working in conjunction with the community college there. The community college is part of the University of Hawaii system, so he was able to lean on some of the resources they had there to facilitate communication and give them some of the materials they needed to use to do the studies. And I started reading about all of these different things he was doing. And essentially what I was coming to these conclusions was that he was developing systems with resources that were sourced locally and producing 4 to 10 times more food using a lot less water and a lot less land than traditional soil agriculture. And I was just tickled by the fact that he was pursuing this area of research. And I immediately emailed him and said, I love what you're doing. I want to study what you're studying. What do I need to know so that I can come study underneath of you? And within a few days, I got a reply with a list of classes that I needed to take before I would be, quote unquote, qualified to come and study underneath of him and be his research assistant. After I got the reply back, I told my dad, who I was living with at the time, was actually getting back on my feet. This was during that time that I was a bit dry, and not a bit, I was just dry. And I told my dad, hey, I want to go to school to the University of Hawaii. And he immediately got this idea to go out on vacation in Hawaii. And I saw this as an opportunity to go see the school and do a scouting mission. Now, my dad had been out to Oahu in the Big Island a couple times for work. One of his assignments as a USDA regulator was to go out on a rotation out there and do his duties at the local plants and operations that were going on out there. So he thought, man, I get to go out there and not work and go on vacation. So we told my brother, Kyle, what we wanted to do, and the three of us scheduled the chance and vacation in May, and I simultaneously scheduled to meet Dr. Harry Ako. And we set up all those things that you do when you go to Hawaii. They're probably different for most people, so I shouldn't be so assumptive. However, we did the things that we wanted to do, which were go see Pearl Harbor, go up to the North Shore and see some waves. It was actually May, so the waves are not that big during that time. And we got to see Haleiwa, and then the Bishop Museum and Iolani Palace. These were things that my dad wanted to do, and I didn't really know much about some of those places other than Pearl Harbor and the North Shore, which was really cool to see the Bishop Museum and Iolani Palace, which is a tragic story in and of itself. And while there, towards the end of the week, I went to tour the University of Manoa campus, University of Hawaii at Manoa campus. Now, we stayed down right near the beach in Waikiki, and the school is actually in view of Waikiki and Diamond Head. And if you're looking towards the ocean from Waikiki and your back faces towards Manoa Valley, and if you were to turn around, you can see some of the structures from the university. Most notably is, or what you see mostly is the Stan Sheriff Center, which is the arena where they do volleyball, and volleyball is insane in Hawaii. Football, no. Baseball, they're great baseball players, but it's volleyball is the sport. People come from all over the island of all ages to watch and play volleyball. And so this school up the valley, and what's really great is Manoa Valley sits, it's this steep valley, and it's a rainforest. Most of Oahu is, aside from where all the concrete buildings may be. And every day, almost every day, the precipitation, the water that comes off the mountains, brings this mist down the valley, and there's usually a rainbow that you can see almost every day. And the valley is nicknamed the Rainbow Valley. And the school is only a few minutes away from Waikiki by vehicle, and I got a ride from the shuttle at the hotel and arrived on campus. The first thing that I noticed when I got on campus was the diversity of plants and trees, and just the differences in greens. I had never seen so many different colors of green in one place, flowers that I had never seen before in my life. And I later learned that the campus is actually an arboretum. It's a tree museum. There are rare species and common species from all over the tropics that are on that campus. So I didn't know that I was seeing something really rare and unique when I got there. And I was immediately in love with the school, with the campus, before ever seeing anything more. And I was dropped off outside this building called Gilmore Hall, and I had an address with the office number. And I walk up to these doors, and I open these doors, and the first thing that I noticed was this just smell. And it was that smell that you smell when you go to a lake or a river, or maybe the beach when it's low tide, and it smells like dying fish and dead plants. Little did I know I would absorb that smell and be part of that for the next few years of my life. And I was inside of this, I was on the ground level, which was actually the basement of this building. And the building was circa, 1960s, I believe. So it was pretty old at this time. And I walked to the room number, and I got to meet this gentleman. I walked up to the door and I knocked on it, and I was immediately greeted by this smiling, jovial, Japanese Hawaiian mid-60s gentleman. And he asked me to sit down, and we made our introductions, and he asked me how my trip had been. Started asking me a little bit about where I was from in Colorado, and he asked me about my dad, and I told him my dad was a veterinarian, and he immediately fell in love with me, and later told me that he taught veterinarians in grad school. So he was partial to veterinarians in general. So I knew right away that we hit it off on a good note, and we started to talk about the research that he was doing, and he said, let's just go take a look. We got up, and one of the first things that I noticed was that he had a motorcycle helmet sitting on his desk when I got in there. And I thought that was a little bit odd. And when he stood up, he had a little bit of a limp. And we walked out of his office, and because of his limp, he had a slower walk. And we walked down the hall and walked into this room, which was this laboratory. It's where the fish smell was coming from. And we went in there, and I saw fish tanks sitting on this countertop all over the room. There were small fish tanks, 10-gallon fish tanks, 20-gallon fish tanks, and some 30-gallon-ish fish tanks, just sitting all around in different stages, all bubbling, greenish water in some, clear water in the others. And I could see in some of the fish tanks that there were these little baby fish. And he started to tell me all of the different experiments, what he was doing, and explain to me the process of how he was using the fish water to grow plants, and told me that the biological processes that we see in nature are similar to what we are trying to mimic in a controlled environment so that we can grow plants at a production level. And he just let me use some little fish nets and do a little bit of the testing that he was doing. I got to use my first dissolved oxygen meter. And then he said, okay, now I want to show you where we're doing the fish breeding. We left the lab and walked out the hallway on the opposite way that we came, and we left this building. We left Gilmore Hall and came out behind another building on campus. And when we came out of this building, I saw in front of me these greenhouses. And in my mind, I'm thinking, awesome, we're going to go check out what we're doing, this really high-tech advanced research in these greenhouses. And as we approached these greenhouses, I clearly could see inside of them that they were empty. And I started to think to myself, okay, so where are we going? And across from these greenhouses is this rusty chain link fence with shade cloth around it, and a gate and a latch attached to an older building, wooden building, with this loud roar coming out of it. And it sounds a bit like a jet engine. And he pulls his keys out of his pockets and grabs the latch and the lock and opens it up and swings the gate open. And inside, I see several fish tanks. There were 6 fish tanks, about 165 gallons, and then there was a 1,000-gallon large fish tank sitting there. And they were just bubbling. Like, you could hear this loud jet engine-like sound was actually this air pump that was pumping all of the air into these different fish tanks. And so he started to tell me that this is where he was doing his fish breeding experiments, and he had begun to go down this path of breeding different tilapia. And we grabbed a big fish net and scooped up some fish, and they splashed us, and I got to handle my first tilapia and learned that tilapia have these sharp spines on their back, and I got poked and bled, and Dr. Akko just laughed at me out loud, and we had a little bit of fun, and he said, okay, now I want to show you where the real good stuff is. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I'm going to get to see the real high-tech stuff. You know, these greenhouses is where we're going. So we put all the stuff away, we shut the gate, lock it, and we start walking, and we walk right past the greenhouses. And I'm like, okay, where are we going? And we turn the corner of this building and start walking through this parking lot. And as we start walking through this parking lot, I'm looking around, not really paying attention too much to where we're going, and not really paying attention to the time that's passing. And before I know it, it's been 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and we're still kind of walking across campus. And I didn't think to ask where we're going, and I didn't say a word. And to be honest, I was a bit embarrassed and shy to ask this guy, who I had no idea where we were going anyways, where we were going, and how that answer would even really give me anything that I was going to, be tangible and know what it meant. So I didn't say anything, mostly because I was shy. And so we start walking, and we walk, past this a couple buildings, and then we get to this next building, and we approach the front entrance and walk right into it. And I'm thinking, okay, This looks like an agricultural research building, so perhaps we're doing some research inside. And we start walking. We go up these flight of stairs, and we walk down this hallway, and we turn down what's more of like a employee-only type hallway, and walk out these doors that enters into a loading dock. And I'm like, okay. We walk off the loading dock, and mind you, I must say that he also hasn't said one word to me this whole time. Didn't tell me where we're going or anything like that. As we're leaving the building, I'm noticing that we're approaching what looks like the edge of campus. The school sits in a valley, and the edge of campus sits against the edge of a mountain. We're not very far from the edge of this really tall mountain. And he continues his trek and essentially walks right off of campus onto the private school's property. And I started looking around like, okay, now we're not even on school grounds anymore. And just about 3-4 strides behind him, now at about 10 minutes of a walk without one word. I'm looking around where we're at, and I'm seeing some young kids in uniforms running around. Looks like it's a private middle school of some sort. And we walk through the parking lot of this school and off those grounds as well. And I'm starting to think, okay, now we're not even on a school anymore. And we approach this trail in front of us, and it is a narrow trail surrounded by large, tall grass. And I do not know the type of grass, but it was taller than me. And I'm not super tall. I'm only 5'7". It was about 6 foot tall grass woven through a rusty chain link fence, and you couldn't see really through the fence at all. And essentially, the trail formed this alley or corridor, and I didn't have much of a vision except for the top of the valley, the top of the mountains that you could see in Manoa. We walk on this trail for about 100 yards, and then out of nowhere, I see this greenhouse right there in front of us. And I just get this sense of relief that comes over me. I'm like, oh my goodness, we've been walking for almost like 15 minutes now. And finally, I get to see this high-tech research that this man is doing and developing and creating and pioneering. And we walk up to this greenhouse, and you can see inside of a greenhouse, and I can see that there's not much inside of this greenhouse. There's very little. And he pulls out his keys, and I'm like, we're going into this empty greenhouse, are we? And we open the door, and we go in there, and there are these 2 wooden boxes sitting on cinder blocks next to small fish tanks. And he is growing cabbages and lettuces in these 4 foot by 8 foot by 1 foot deep wooden boxes that are lined with a plastic liner. And in retrospect, I look at it in this way. At the time, I was very judgmental, and I thought to myself, this can't be where this guy is doing this novel research, state-of-the-art aquaponic research. Looks like he's been doing it with a few $100s. And we spent the next half hour in there talking about all of the research that he was doing, and it became very, very clear to me in those moments that my judgments were immediately wrong, and that what he was doing was trying to figure out a way to develop a system with the simplest, most cost-effective materials. And it was in those moments that I clearly knew that I had to learn how to do things completely differently. I saw in my interactions in those moments with Dr. Akko that there was clearly a different way of thinking and approaching science than I was taught in the world that I grew up with. After our long visit and then 15-minute walk back to his office, I knew that I was going to be there the following semester to be his student, to be his acolyte, an Akko acolyte, as I just made up right now. And I spent the next 3 years of my life in Hawaii learning from Dr. Akko and studying under him almost every single day. I was in the lab from sun up to sundown, doing all things aquaponics and going through those struggles of what it meant to be a new student in a new place in a completely foreign land. But that is all that I have for you today on this Sunday. A brief introduction about my meeting of my first major mentor in life, Dr. Harry Akko. Join us next week when I will talk a bit more about some of those experiences with school and share with you some of the epiphanies about hydroponics that I got to learn from Dr. Harry Akko and other Hawaiian farmers that he introduced me to. If you've enjoyed this or any previous episodes, follow or subscribe and tap the notification so you can get the new episodes. To learn more about how hydroponic fodder helps farmers save water, improve livestock quality, and become better stewards, get yourself a copy of my book at thinkingoutsidethesoil.com and tune into future episodes. If you like what you've heard or hear so far, leave a comment in the box below and let others know why they should listen too. So follow the show, get the book, and check out the links in the box below so you don't miss out on becoming part of the next agricultural revolution. And thank you for being with me on another episode. Take care and have a lovely day.